The Buffalo Bills sign linebacker Nicholas Morrow. They sign wide receiver Mack Hollins. And Jordan Poyer is a Dolphin. We're going to break all of that down today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. You know the drill. We've got Bills news to reflect upon. It is Wednesday, March 13th. It is 11:58 a.m. Eastern time, and so this will cover all of the Bills news that happens up to that point in time. If anything happens after that, I don't know about it, and we will cover that in the next episode. But we do have a couple of new additions. Nicholas Morrow, a linebacker, Mack Hollins, a wide receiver. I want to break down those additions in addition to Jordan Poyer becoming a Miami Dolphin. And, of course, we have to check in on Brandon Beane's to-do list as he continues to check boxes, but still has plenty of big boxes left to check. So let's get into it. Let's start with Nicholas Morrow. The Bills signed this free agent linebacker. He's 28 years old. He turns 29 in July. Was an undrafted free agent in 2017 out of Greenville. And in fact, he's the first ever player out of Greenville to sign an NFL contract. In college, he played safety, 6 foot, 216-pound safety that converted to linebacker in the NFL, and he's now weighing in around 225 pounds. He's a very athletic guy, obviously coming from playing safety. He's got some ability to play in space and the ability to play in coverage, but his RAS score, his relative athletic score, is only a 7.1, which is an above average score, but those calculations factor in him only being 216 pounds. So he's now 225, which hurts that score. He's now 225. What hurts his score is that he's at 216. He's a very small linebacker. So that's just something to keep in mind. So he started his career in 2017 with the Raiders as an undrafted free agent. He remained with the Raiders through the 2021 season. Then he spent 2022 with the Bears, spent 2023 with the Eagles. And to this point in his career, he's played in 94 NFL games. He started 58 NFL games, 40 of those 58 starts coming in the last 3 years, including 12 last season for the Eagles, where he also was the green dot player, the guy that called the defense for the Philadelphia Eagles. So Nicholas Morrow is an athletic guy that can play in space. He's actually been a very good blitzer and pressure player over the last couple of seasons. In fact, this past year, 3 sacks and 12 tackles for loss. Morrow's an experienced player with a resume of production. He's been north of 73 tackles in each of the last 4 seasons and also has a very robust special teams resume in the NFL. He's averaged over 160 special team snaps per season and has played all 4 phases of special teams in the NFL. And when I say that, I mean kick coverage, punt coverage, kick return, punt return. Those are your 4 phases of special teams. Now, I'll do a film study on him soon to become even more acquainted with his overall game, but I am familiar with him from watching the NFL, keeping up with the NFL. I'm very aware of him. In fact, a few years ago, when Matt Milano was set to become a free agent, and there was a lot of concern that the Bills won't be able to bring back Matt Milano, Nicholas Morrow was on my short list of players that I wanted them to sign to replace Milano as a starter. And so fast forward a couple of years, he comes to Buffalo as a depth player. And I think that's an important thing to be mindful of. Something that hurt the team last year was linebacker depth. And typically what you'll see across the NFL is where there's a position where the depth got you in trouble, you will correct that in the following offseason. And I think Nicholas Morrow does that for the Buffalo Bills. I mean, just remind yourself that at the end of the season against Kansas City in the divisional round, the Bills had to start A.J. Klein. That's tough, right? Had to play against Pittsburgh as well. You lose Matt Milano, and Tyrell Dotson comes in and does a good job as an early down player, but you had to scheme around his limitations. Baylon Spector got a couple of chances to play. The dude gets hurt every time he gets a chance to play. You got Dorian Williams, who's an intriguing, recent third-round pick, fast, physical dude, but he's a mess when it comes to processing. If you watched the All-22 against the Giants and the Patriots, you would realize that they just toyed with him out there. And coming from that two-lane defense, it was always going to be a big jump to the next level. And so you had some issues with linebacker depth last year, and now you add a player in Nicholas Morrow that helps in that capacity. So 3 major takeaways here from this signing is, number one, Morrow is stylistically similar to Bernard and Milano. And if you were to lose either player for extended period of time or even for a game or two, you don't have to reinvent the way you play defense if one of them gets injured. Right? Last year it was, okay, Tyrell Dotson, this super sub, love what he brings as an early down player, but on long and late downs, you got to bring Poyer down to linebacker. You got to get Dotson off the field. You got to bring in another safety. You don't have to do that with a player like Nicholas Morrow. So I think step one is you have a more stylistically similar player as your potential linebacker 3. Number 2 is that you do have competition now for Dorian Williams as linebacker 3. And again, I'm optimistic about Dorian Williams. I think he can be an X factor for this defense. I've been saying that. But in no way, shape, or form should Dorian Williams enter 2024 as the assumed linebacker 3. He absolutely needed competition, and he gets it in the form of Nicholas Morrow. I think that's very, very, very much needed. Again, there's no way Dorian Williams should have entered 2024 as the assumed LB3 with Baylon Spector as his most meaningful competition. And then number 3, when it comes to this deal, Nicholas Morrow does have that special teams background. So not only can he potentially help you on base packages of defense when we talk about going 3 linebackers, which could be necessary, as I've talked a lot about the trends of the NFL and going with more heavy personnel and challenging these teams defensively that are putting smaller personnel in the field and daring you to try to throw it on them, right? There's been a shift philosophically. But you get the special teams ability, and as we know, the Bills' special teams regressed last year. So there's no downside with this move. There's no downside whatsoever. I'm a big fan of this as a depth move. Like I'm keeping it in proper context. This isn't a player that's going to come and reinvigorate and change the dynamics of the Buffalo Bills defense, but as LB3, as competition for Dorian Williams, as an experienced player, as a guy who has done a lot on special teams, you feel like you get a little bit better with a guy like this. Again, keeping that in proper context. So your linebacker depth chart right now, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Nicholas Morrow, Dorian Williams, Baylon Spector. That's it. That's the 5 guys you have on the roster right now. And you're going to roster 5 guys. And right now you have 5 guys for 5 spots. You need 3 or 4 more players at this position in your 90-man roster for camp and, all your competition and camp battles and all that type of stuff. Nicholas Morrow, to me, is a great start. You still got more to do here at linebacker in terms of beefing up the depth and adding competition. We don't have the terms of this contract yet. I would assume it's a 1-year deal. That's a fairly minimum type contract. So that was the first player the Bills signed. They also added Mack Hollins, another player that'll be helpful for special teams and as an X factor on offense. I'm going to break that down for you here in just a moment, so be sure to stick with me. You shouldn't have to worry When you're looking to buy tickets for your next big event, well, you don't have to, because Gametime is here, and it's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets, all-in prices. They give you a view from your seat and a best price guarantee. I mean, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. The app is awesome, easy to navigate. I love the flash deals that they'll give you when you log in from time to time. And I also love this. When you buy a ticket from Gametime, they send it straight to your phone, so you don't have to dig through emails to find it. It goes straight to your phone. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Lowest prices, last-minute tickets guaranteed. All right, folks, the Bills added another player, wide receiver Mack Hollins. We're going to talk all about him in this segment. So Mack Hollins signs a one-year deal worth up to $3 million. So some incentives baked into it, a modest deal, even if he earned all of it. But you can see the Bills have another deal that is very incentive-based, and I feel like that's a good thing. And hopefully these guys do all the things that they're supposed to do and make all this money. But you can definitely see some intentionality from Brandon Beane on incentive-based deals. Mack Hollins is 30 years old. He turns 31 in September, was a fourth-round pick by the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017 out of North Carolina, where he was a college teammate of Bills' backup quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky. He's 6'4", 220 pounds, so a big receiver, 33.5-inch arms. He ran a 4.53 40-yard dash, so he definitely fills this height, weight, speed dynamic at the wide receiver position at 6'4", 220, 33.5-inch arms, and a 4.53 40-yard dash at that size. So Hollins spent his first 3 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, and then 2020 and 2021 with the Miami Dolphins, 2022 with the Vegas Raiders, and then last year with the Atlanta Falcons. His best season as a receiver came in 2022 with the Raiders. Caught 57 passes for 690 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, was on the field for 94% of the snaps. And most of his other seasons, he's been around a 40% of the snap player offensively. But he's best known for his special teams. He's been an excellent four-phase special teams player throughout his entire NFL career. 4 times in college, he was a special teams captain, which is a big deal. Like, that's a lot of captainship at the college level. 4 times special teams captain. And he was also a captain for the Miami Dolphins in 2021. So leadership, size, speed, physicality, special teams, you can kind of see what the reason for this signing was. I think you should be thinking Trent Sherfield replacement here. Can play the X receiver. So as I've talked about a lot, as the Bills are considering the wide receivers that they would add, I said they need an X receiver. They need a guy that has size and speed down the field. Hello, Mack Hollins. That opens things up for your underneath targets, Diggs, Shakir, Kincaid, right? That's where those guys eat. James Cook, that's where those guys eat. And you have a guy that can kind of push the roof. That's helpful. You have a guy that you can isolate on one side of the formation and put like a bunch set on the other side. You can trust Mack Hollins to win some leverage battles and maybe help even with your quick passing game. So what does he bring? He brings that ability to play the X receiver, which I just talked about, and how important that is for the other weapons on the team. Size and physicality. He gives you that vertical ability. Here's a fun stat on Mack Hollins. In college, on 81 career catches in college, he averaged over 20 yards per reception, 20.6 yards per reception in college on 81 catches. I think maybe in his second or third season, he averaged over 24 yards per catch. He's also an excellent blocker, which you would expect for a guy that's 6'4", 220, but that's not always the case. And special teams. So like a highly useful player to have on the roster. Highly useful. Again, this isn't a guy that's going to change the dynamics of the Buffalo Bills offense. That's like, don't get it twisted. He's a role player. But you can assess the skill set. You can assess the resume. You can assess the need. And to me, it's a very clear path to how he helps this football team. I also think he'll be a major asset to Justin Shorter, just like I talked about Nicholas Morrow and what he can mean for Dorian Williams. For Justin Shorter, who's as raw as they come. I know we didn't get a chance to see him, but I watched him in preseason. I watched a ton of him at Florida. A very rigid player, height, weight, speed guy, linear athlete, some limitations, but a very underdeveloped player. Mack Hollins is going to help in that capacity. And not only with being an example for Justin Shorter, but also in the form of competition, right? Tell that guy, watch what Mack Hollins does, because this is the type of ceiling that I envision for a Justin Shorter. I talked about him as a Jake Kumaro type player. Well, that's exactly what Mack Hollins is, a Jake Kumaro type player. So I think he'll be an asset in that capacity. One thing I do want to stress is that this move doesn't preclude more investments at wide receiver. So if you were vastly concerned about the Bills wide receiver core and wanting to really get an answer, this isn't the marquee move. It's a one-year deal worth up to $3 million. It's a role player for this football team. I'd expect he plays 30, 40% of the offensive snaps, a lot of the special team snaps. This doesn't preclude anything else. And if anything, it invites more. To me, this signals to me even more likely that an early draft pick is coming at the wide receiver position, which I think most of us are hoping for. When it comes to this Buffalo Bills passing game, I think it's important to look at what number guys are in the pecking order for targets. Diggs is the 1. Kincaid is the 2. I mean, and that's probably pushing 300 targets right there between those two guys. Khalil Shakir is the 3. I'd love for Shakir to be north of 80 targets this year. James Cook is the 4, which you think is 50 to 70 targets right there. I think you have a draft pick that winds up being the 5. And then your 6 and 7 is like Dawson Knox and Mack Hollins. I think it's important to look at it through that lens. Being mindful of who are your core playmakers, who are your key players in this passing game. And I think that allows you to have good foresight and understanding as to what has happened and what will happen and what they need. When it comes to the wide receiver depth chart and who you're going to roster, the Bills rostered 5 receivers last year. I think that's what they're going to do again this year. I think you have Stefon Diggs, Khalil Shakir, Mack Hollins as 3 of them, a high draft pick as the 4th, and then your 5th spot is competition between another draft pick, another modest vet signing, and Justin Shorter, and then you also have Andy Isabella and KJ Hamler. Like, I feel like this is kind of coming together. Again, this isn't a player that's going to reinvent the Buffalo Bills offense, but as an X factor, as a very useful piece of your roster, like, not every player is Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, Stefon Diggs, Deion Dawkins. Like, you need players 40 to 53 on the roster too, and you need all of them if you're going to be a good football team. So have the right mindset with this addition. I think that's important because I feel like there's disappointment out there, and I don't understand the disappointment. Expectations minus reality equals disappointment. If you're disappointed, your expectations weren't in the right place. You knew the cap was tight. I think the fact that they were able to get Daquan Jones and AJ Epinesa back is already more than I anticipated. And it was always about filling in the gaps with bargain signings. And that's what Nicholas Morrow, that's what Mack Hollins provide this football team. And I think it's important to understand that. The Bills were never going to be a team this year that was going to make huge splashes. And let's be honest, do the big splashes often really work out? I've been trying to stress this. I put out a tweet a few days ago of every contract in free agency signed over the last 4 years, north of $8 million per season. And folks, it's a dumpster fire. Like, most of the moves don't work. And the teams that are out there chasing these big deals are bad football teams. The Commanders, the Raiders, the Titans, the Panthers. These are the teams that are like the mid-2010s Bills that are just trying to be relevant, that are trying to give their fan base something to be interested about, that have to overpay to get talent on the free agent market. Like, that's what bad teams do. So I'm completely unconcerned that the Bills haven't went out and added all these high-dollar players. First of all, they never were going to. And second of all, that's just not smart team building. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. Two very nice, useful veteran additions to this football team. All right, in just a second, I'm going to give you my thoughts on Jordan Poyer to the Miami Dolphins. We'll check in on Brandon Beane's to-do list as well, so be sure to stick with me. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you could still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is only good through April 30th, so get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, folks. This has been a fun conversation to this point, and one thing I've been really trying to tell you guys about this week is the Locked On Bills subtext community. It's a great time to make sure that you're part of it, because here's what you get. First of all, it's one-on-one texting with me. You can send me a text message anytime you want. And, I've been talking with Bills fans through the subtext all week, pretty much around the clock. So that's really cool. But also you get my first reaction to all major Bills news. So when the Bills signed Nicholas Morrow, when they signed Mack Hollins, I sent out a text message with kind of the details and my initial thoughts on everything. And that happens for all major Bills news. So it's been a busy week of that. You also get access to our Discord channel. So you get the one-on-one texting with me through the subtext, but also you get access to our Discord channel, which is more of a community environment where we've got, I think, over 600 Bills fans in there talking Bills, NFL draft, Sabres, life, fitness, nutrition, all kinds of cool stuff in there. I also share some film clips in there as well. So check out the Locked On Bills subtext community. It's a great time to get in on it. We've been doing it for almost a year now. So check it out. If you want to join, there's a link in today's show notes. And so click on the show notes, whether you're on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast, and you can be part of the Locked On Bills subtext community. All right, so Jordan Poyer is a Miami Dolphin. Let's talk about this. Signed a 1-year, $2 million deal, which is the same AAV as Cam Lewis, which I find to be pretty interesting. But the point being that the Bills made a choice. Just like I talked about with Mitch Morse, they didn't have to do it. They didn't have to do this with Jordan Poyer. They made a choice. They said to themselves, it's time to move on. And the consequence of that is he goes and he's able to sign with whatever team he wants to. And if you've been paying attention through the last couple of years, Jordan Poyer and his wife very clearly have been wanting to go play for Miami. I thought it was going to happen last year. And then the money wasn't there. He comes back to Buffalo. And then the Bills release him after one season, and he finds himself with the Miami Dolphins. I think he lives in South Florida. You could tell this is what he wanted. It's going to be strange for sure, right? I mean, Jordan Poyer, potentially a Bills Wall of Famer, right? Like a revered player for the team. He's going to be playing for the Aqua and Orange. Just like Thurman Thomas, right? Thurman Thomas did the same thing. Went to Miami. And I have a lot to say about this. Like, first of all, my initial thought is, well, Jordan Poyer has a lot of insight on the Buffalo Bills And I'm sure that's going to be valuable to the Miami Dolphins, who have a Buffalo Bills problem. The Bills have beat them 13 of the last 15 times. The Bills have won the division the last 4 years. The Miami Dolphins are surely tired of that. And Jordan Poyer is going there and obviously has a lot of insight on the Bills. Now, there's going to be a lot of turnover with the Bills' defensive players, and we already know the coaching staff defensively is completely different. There's only one coach. I've said this a bunch of times. There's only one coach defensively from 2023 that's in the same role in 2024. So, yes, he does have insight, but also there's a lot of things different with the Bills. And also the Bills are aware of that. They know that Jordan Poyer knows what he knows, and he's going to Miami. So that's the other side of it. It goes both ways. But what he can offer is insight on how philosophically the Bills game planned against Miami. He definitely has that. The Bills have played this Mike McDaniel Dolphins team 5 times, 3 in 2022, 2 last year. So Poyer knows that stuff. And again, the Bills are aware of that. So I'm kind of interested in that piece of this conversation. And I've seen some fans out there just like very mad and upset about Jordan Poyer going to the Miami Dolphins. I don't understand that. Remember, the Bills cut Jordan Poyer. They released him. They made the choice to move on. And it's well within his rights to go play for the football team that he wants to go play for that also wants him. And we'll see. I mean, it's a 1-year, $2 million deal. You would assume that they would bring him in to be the starter next to Javon Holland. That money doesn't necessarily say that for sure, but you feel like that would be what's kind of the plan here. So Jordan Poyer and Miami Dolphins. That's going to be weird. When the Bills play the Dolphins and Poyer's getting to be in the shade at Hard Rock Stadium instead of out in the sun, and he's got that white, teal, and orange instead of the red, white, and blue. It's going to be weird. Nyheim Hines is also a Cleveland Brown now. Signed a 1-year deal worth up to $3.5 million. The Bills obviously released him. It reunites him with Ken Dorsey, the Bills offensive coordinator, who inherited Nyheim Hines when the Bills traded for him in 2022. Running back depth is important for Cleveland. They have Nick Chubb, who is coming off of a major injury. They had to rely on Jerome Ford last year. They had to bring in the ghost of Kareem Hunt. So they need some running back depth, but I'm kind of curious to see, what's Nyheim Hines like after the injury. I think we've learned some valuable lessons about how guys come back from injuries and how to, calibrate your expectations for that first year. So kind of curious to see how Nyheim Hines does with the Cleveland Browns, but I do feel like that's a pretty good landing spot for him. All right, let's check in real quick on Brandon Beane's to-do list before we get out of here today. Boxes that he's checked, starting one tech with Daquan Jones, starting safety with Taylor Rapp, starting defensive end with AJ Epinesa, backup quarterback with Mitchell Trubisky, wide receiver depth with Mack Hollins, safety depth with Cam Lewis, and linebacker depth with Nicholas Morrow. What does he still need to figure out? Well, he needs another starting safety. He needs another wide receiver, potentially a wide receiver 2. And again, I don't mean that in terms of second option in the passing game. I mean kind of that X receiver that can complement Shakir and Diggs. He needs defensive tackle depth in a big way. This is probably the thing that I'm most panicking about right now. You have Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver. That's it. You have a ton of snaps available for defensive tackle 3 and 4. You still need more defensive end depth. You need an entire running back room. You need an RB2 and an RB3. You need a punt returner. You need offensive line depth, and you need corner depth. So we're chipping away at this thing, but still plenty of chipping left to do. And we're going to talk about all of it here on the Locked On Bills podcast. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Check out the Locked On Bills subtext community. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share this podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I'll catch up with you again very soon.